Hey guys, Arterod here. It's been a while since my last video, the reason for which will be placed in the description below, along with some changes as to how I'm going to be handling my regular series from here on out. Take a peek after if you're curious, but for now let's just get right into it. Now I'm bringing to you some Mitt Romney info, because I so love American politics. It's much more exciting than the dry-as-toast stuff on my end of the border. This episode has to do with a rather troubling little mistake that Romney made in his speech during a Beverly Hills fundraiser recently. His wife and he had been in a plane that was forced to land when an electrical fire took place. Now, yes, scary incident, plane filling up with smoke. It's understandable how that could get anyone a little bit upset. But the next day, during his fundraiser speech, Romney said, to loosely quote, "When you have a fire in an aircraft, there's no place to go exactly. And you can't find any oxygen from outside the aircraft to get in the aircraft because the windows don't open. I don't know why they don't do that. It's a real problem, so it's very dangerous." Now, I figured he must be joking, but evidently his tone gave no indication. He seemed entirely serious about it. So I imagine that any "I was just joking" statements that show up in the near future will have a bit of a Jack Thompson satire style to them. Now let's assume that he was serious though, which is a scary thought because that means a grown man honestly didn't know that opening a window in an airplane 11,000 feet above the ground would be a bad idea. Look, you could say he's not a scientist, but really, do you have to be a scientist to know this fact? I'm not a scientist. I've only been on a plane less than a dozen times in my entire life, and I know that it's a terrible idea. I mean, God, this seems like something the pointy-haired boss from Dilbert would recommend. But you know what? Him not knowing is purely secondary to this, because while having such a gap in one's knowledge is bad enough, to demonstrate it in a public speech the next day is even worse. Why? Well, because it's clear that as concerned as he was with this issue, he didn't do any research on it at all. He didn't hop onto Google to check it out. He didn't ask one of his campaign people to look into it. Didn't even ask someone running the plane that he was on at the time of the landing, or at the airport he landed in. He went an entire day with this bouncing around his head, and not once did it occur to him to look into it, because it wouldn't have been difficult to find out if he'd only taken a few moments to do so with a smartphone. Of course, you might say that it was due to the trauma of the experience, to the admittedly discomforting and even disturbing effects that being on a plane that might or might not crash would have on you. But I put forward that, if anything, it gives him all the more reason to look into it, because this is an issue that he was personally involved in. God knows that if I was on a plane and smoke filled the cabin and I didn't know why we couldn't roll down the windows, I'd fucking check. So if he's unwilling to remain properly informed about matters that he himself has gotten involved in, well then I shudder to wonder how thorough he'll be in fact-checking issues that would influence his decisions as President of the United States. Because when you're in a position like that, with decisions of that magnitude, boyo, you'd better fucking fact-check. Because we here in Canada are only convinced that we won't get nuked sooner or later because we know that the fallout from the devastation would sweep across the border and screw you guys over as well. But what if Romney doesn't know about nuclear fallout? Oh God, we're all gonna die. Now, when you measure this alongside the Todd Akin shitstorm that took place not too long ago, well, I gotta say, a Republican-run government is looking scarier and scarier. Now, I'm not automatically saying vote Democrat, but I am urging everyone to please examine the parties carefully before you make your decision. Not just their platforms, because, well, let's face it, political platforms are comparable to the slurred, earnest professions of love that the local bar drunk has foisted on the seventh woman in a row, but rather on their past behavior, their accomplishments, and their screw-ups. Do not judge based on haircut or height, or passionate speeches. And I swear to God, if anyone judges based on whether they'd find the candidate suitable to sitting on the porch to drink a beer with, I will lock them in their closet until the voting period is passed. Anyway, guys, this is Arterot, reminding you that nuclear fallout can sweep across neighboring countries and irrevocably damage their ability to produce crops. Just remember that if you get elected into office. Please.